let's talk about something that's, well, it's more than just a story about a few bad cops. This is about how a whole system can just completely fall apart, how it lets its heroes become the villains. So, how on earth did this happen? Let's get into it.
Yeah, I know. That sounds like something out of a movie, right? An elite police unit becoming a criminal gang? But it's the absolute truth of what happened with the Baltimore Gun Trace Task Force. I mean, these guys were supposed to be the best of the best, the ones taking guns off the street. Instead, they used their badges as a license to do the exact opposite, robbing people, even dealing drugs.
And you can just imagine the chaos that followed. It was catastrophic. When the news broke, the city's top prosecutor, Marilyn Mosby, she knew right away how big this was. Think about it. Hundreds, maybe even thousands of criminal cases suddenly thrown into question. Why? Because the very officers who made the arrests were criminals themselves. The whole system just ground to a halt. So, this is the big question we're tackling. How does a celebrated police squad go so wrong? How do they become one of the most corrupt units in a generation? Well, a huge 500-page report dug into all of it. And the answer? It's way more disturbing than just blaming a few bad apples. We're talking about a rot that went deep, right to the very core of the department. Okay, so first things first. To really get a grip on how the system failed, we've got to look at how this squad just completely imploded. Now, on paper, the Gun Trace Task Force, or GTTF, had a super important job, right? They were a plainclothes unit, and their mission was simple: get illegal guns off the streets of Baltimore. In a city struggling with gun violence, these guys were supposed to be the tip of the spear. But what they were actually doing? It was unbelievable. They were basically running a racketeering enterprise. And the list of crimes they were charged with, it's just staggering. We're not talking about just taking a little cash on the side. No, this was a full-blown criminal operation. Robberies, extortion, planting evidence on people, and then just lying on all the official paperwork to cover their tracks. And the nerve they had? Wow, it was off the charts. Get this, the investigation found they were committing massive overtime fraud. The best, or I guess worst, example? Some of these officers were claiming overtime for working in Baltimore while they were literally on vacation together in the Dominican Republic. I mean, can you believe that? That's a level of arrogance that's just breathtaking. So you have to ask yourself, how did things get this bad? Well, when you look closer, you start to see this long trail of red flags, warnings that were either completely missed or, and this is even more disturbing, just flat out ignored for years. Okay, let's look at just one of these guys, Officer Daniel Hurdle. His career is like a textbook example of a broken system. Back in 2003, complaint for a bar fight. A couple years later, he's flagged for problematic conduct. Then in 2006, another complaint for assault, for kicking someone. And the punishment for all this? Basically nothing. A few days of lost leave here, a training there, and get this, a non-punitive counseling letter. It was all right there in his file, a clear pattern. And then you've got the ringleader, Sergeant Wayne Jenkins. This guy was the heart of the GTTF. People saw him as this super charismatic, go-getter leader, but you guessed it, he also had a really troubling history, long before this whole thing blew up. Take a look at this number, $8 million. That's how much the city had to pay out to two men who were sent to prison for a crime they didn't commit. Why? Because Wayne Jenkins and some other officers planted heroin in their car. This happened way back in 2010, so years before the GTTF scandal even broke. Jenkins was at the center of a case that cost the city millions. And what happened to him? Not only did he keep his job, he got promoted, and put in charge of this elite squad. It's just unbelievable. See, this is where it gets bigger than just a few guys. This wasn't just about a couple of officers getting away with stuff. This was about a whole culture inside the department that basically gave them the green light. For a long time, a big strategy in the Baltimore Police Department was something called buy and bust. Basically, the goal was quantity over quality. Just rack up as many arrests as possible, mostly of low-level guys on the street. It made the stats look great, right? But people were saying for years that this wasn't actually stopping the big drug organizations, and it was destroying any trust with the community. And this right here just shows you the massive disconnect. Internally, you've got memos praising Jenkins and his team, saying their work ethic is beyond reproach. Because, hey, they were making a ton of arrests. But then you look at what was really happening on the street. There's a story of a lieutenant telling another detective he needs to be more like Jenkins. And what did that mean? It meant, and this is a direct quote, no matter what it takes to get into people's houses, whether it is legal or not, you need to start doing it. The department rewarded the numbers and didn't seem to care how they got them.
And look, this wasn't some new, shocking development. This quote here, it's from a federal judge way back in 2003. He saw exactly what was going on. He called out the BPD, saying they are not making cases, they are just making arrests. The writing was on the wall for over a decade. The warnings were loud and clear.
Okay, so if there were red flags everywhere, and the whole culture was pushing for this kind of behavior, then how in the world did these guys finally get caught? Well, the answer to that really shows you just how badly the system had failed.
So who blew the whistle? It wasn't internal affairs. You know, the department's own cops who were supposed to police the police. They never connected the dots, even though people were filing complaints against these officers for years.
It wasn't their supervisors either. The sergeants and lieutenants who were supposed to be signing off on their reports and overtime slips, nope, they didn't catch them. In fact, a lot of them were the ones praising them for bringing in such high numbers. Which leads us to maybe the most shocking finding from the big report on this whole mess. The GTTF wasn't taken down because some internal system finally worked. Nope, it was, and I quote, the result of happenstance and luck. Just pure dumb luck. So here's how it all went down. Police in a nearby county were working a totally separate drug case. They find a GPS tracker on their target's car, which is weird, so they trace it, and it leads them to a GTTF officer. Now here's the crazy part. The officer who planted the tracker wasn't even one of the corrupt ones. But it was so strange that it got flagged and sent to the FBI. And that referral, that one little thread, is what led the FBI to pull and unravel the entire criminal enterprise. Just a complete accident.
So when it all came out and investigators put all the pieces together, the conclusion was just staring them in the face. This was never a story about a few bad apples. It was about a system that was rotten to the core. And that final report, it just lays it all out. Their internal affairs unit, way too weak and understaffed. The system they had for tracking complaints, totally broken. They couldn't even flag a guy like Herschel with his long history. And the culture? It was all about arrest stats, not about doing things the right way. Supervisors weren't supervising, and that early intervention system they supposedly had for problem officers, the report called it haphazard and ineffective. Basically, every single safety net that should have been there had failed. And all of this, it just leaves us with the biggest, toughest question of all. The story of the Gun Trace Task Force shows us that when the very systems that are supposed to stop corruption actually start to reward it, a scandal like this isn't just possible, it's pretty much inevitable. Which leads us to the one question that really matters.